Cindy, at 73, no one joined her at the funeral. Then she sang alone and stopped the city, "Welcome back and enjoy the story." The rain falls mercilessly on a small chapel in the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina. Inside, an elderly woman stands alone beside a closed casket. The funeral director glances at his watch impatiently. Not a single guest has arrived for the service scheduled to begin 30 minutes ago. Francine, a 73-year-old retired music teacher with silver hair and tired eyes, places a single white rose on the casket of her childhood best friend. When the funeral director suggests they proceed with the abbreviated service, Francine shakes her head. Instead, she steps up to the small chapel podium, takes a deep breath and begins to sing "Amazing Grace" in a voice so powerful and emotive it seems impossible it could come from her frail frame. The sound fills the empty chapel, each note carrying decades of emotion. Francine's hands grip the podium, knuckles white with arthritis and memory. She closes her eyes, transported to another time when her voice wasn't just a lonely echo in an empty room. The funeral director stands transfixed, his impatience forgotten as the pure, haunting melody washes over him. Outside, the rain continues, its relentless pattern, drumming against the chapel's stained glass windows in an unplanned accompaniment. As Francine reaches the verse about dangers, toils, and snares, her voice cracks slightly, not from lack of ability, but from the weight of the words. How many snares had life laid for her? How many dangers had she navigated only to end up here, singing alone for a friend who was her last connection to a past life? Still, she continues, her voice growing stronger with each phrase, as if defying the emptiness surrounding her. Just as she begins the final verse, the chapel door creaks open. A young woman with rain-soaked hair slips inside, seeking shelter from the storm. She freezes in the doorway, captivated by the scene before her. An elderly woman singing with her whole soul to an audience of one uncomfortable funeral director and a closed casket adorned with a single rose. Without thinking, the young woman pulls out her phone and begins recording, her own eyes filling with tears at the raw emotion emanating from this stranger's performance. Francine is oblivious to her new audience member. She finishes the hymn with a final soaring note that hangs in the air long after her voice has ceased. Only then does she open her eyes, surprised to see the young woman standing near the door. Their eyes meet briefly, one set tired but momentarily alight with passion, the other wide with wonder, before Francine nods to the funeral director that she's ready to conclude the service. "That was beautiful," the young woman says, her voice barely above a whisper in the sacred silence that follows such music. "I hope you don't mind that I recorded a bit of it. I've never heard anything like that before." Francine merely nods, too overwhelmed to speak. She hadn't sung like that in public for decades, hadn't felt that particular fire in her chest since before her life took its series of wrong turns. Now, standing in this empty chapel saying goodbye to Dolores, her oldest friend and fiercest competitor, she feels almost like the young woman she once was. Francine Montgomery, whose voice professors once claimed could bring angels down from heaven just to listen. After a perfunctory conclusion to the service, Francine walks slowly out into the rain, declining the funeral director's offer of an umbrella. The young woman, still lingering in the vestibule, calls after her. "Ma'am, would you mind if I shared this? People should hear you." Francine turns, the rain already plastering her silver hair to her forehead. With a small, tired gesture of her hand that could be interpreted as either permission or dismissal, she continues toward the bus stop. What does it matter who hears her now? The people who once mattered, her ex-husband George, her estranged daughter Nancy, the audiences who briefly adored her, they're all long gone from her life. Let the internet have this final performance. At least someone had been there to witness her farewell to Dolores. Back in her modest apartment, Francine methodically removes her rain-soaked clothes and changes into a worn but comfortable housecoat. The walls around her tell the story her words rarely do. Faded photographs of a younger Francine in elegant gowns on various stages, certificates of musical achievement yellowing at the edges, a collection of vinyl records featuring opera singers, whose careers flourished while hers withered. In the corner stands her most prized possession, an upright piano covered with a thin layer of dust, untouched for months despite her best intentions. She makes a cup of tea and settles into her worn armchair, reaching for the letter that had arrived with news of Dolores's passing. Her friend had sent it to be delivered after her death, a final message from beyond the grave. Francine had read it countless times in the week since it arrived, each reading bringing fresh pain and confusion. Now, returning from the funeral, she unfolds it once more, her arthritis-swollen fingers careful with the delicate paper. "My dearest Francine," the letter begins in Dolores's distinctive handwriting. "By the time you read this, I will be gone, and there are truths you should finally know." Francine sighs, sipping her tea as thunder rumbles outside. The truth, after all these years, did it even matter anymore? According to Dolores's confession, it was she who had orchestrated the devastating review of Francine's breakthrough performance at the Charleston Opera House 40 years ago. It was Dolores who had anonymously sent evidence of George's first affair to the newspaper, knowing it would devastate Francine at the height of her most important audition season. It was Dolores, consumed by jealousy and ambition, who had systematically
undermined the career Francine had sacrificed so much to build. I cannot die with this in on Dolores had written, "You had the talent I coveted, the voice I given anything to."
I'd told myself I was merely leveling the playing field, but in truth I was destroying something beautiful out of my own bitterness. I don't expect forgiveness, but you deserve to know that your failures were not of your making. Your voice was everything they said it was. It should have been you on those stages, not teaching piano to ungrateful children for decades. Francine folds the letter and places it on the side table. Outside her window, Charleston continues its evening rhythm. Oblivious to the quiet revelations in her small apartment, she closes her eyes, suddenly exhausted by the day, by the past, by the rain that continues its steady percussion against her windows. If only Dolores had confessed 40 years ago. If only... The shrill ring of her landline phone startles Francine from her thoughts. Few people have this number, even fewer use it, probably a telemarketer or wrong number. She considers letting it ring, but ultimately rises from her chair with a small groan as her joints protest the movement. "Hello?" she answers, her voice returning to its usual soft, unassuming tone, so different from the powerful instrument that had filled the chapel hours earlier. "Is this Francine Montgomery?" asks an excited young woman's voice. "This is Francine Wilson," she corrects automatically. She had reverted to her maiden name after the divorce, but even now, decades later, hearing her married name sends a small pang through her chest. "Montgomery was my professional name, long ago." "Ms. Montgomery, I mean Ms. Wilson, my name, is Beth Connor from Channel 5 News. A video of you singing at a funeral today has gone completely viral. Over 2 million views in just a few hours. Everyone wants to know who you are. Would you be willing to do an interview tomorrow?" Francine leans against the wall, suddenly needing its support. "I'm sorry. What did you say about a video?" As Beth excitedly explains about the young woman's recording and its explosive spread, across social media, Francine's mind races. 2 million strangers have heard her sing, have seen her in that moment of private grief, have witnessed what she thought was a final, personal goodbye to Dolores and to the voice she once had. "I'm not interested in interviews," Francine says finally, cutting through Beth's enthusiastic pitch about human interest, stories, and second chances. "Thank you for calling." She hangs up before the reporter can protest. Immediately, the phone rings again. This time, Francine doesn't answer. After the fifth call in 30 minutes, she unplugs the phone entirely and draws the curtains against the darkening sky. The world had its chance with Francine Montgomery 40 years ago. She has no interest in becoming a curiosity, a viral sensation, a momentary distraction for people who know nothing of what she's lost. As she prepares for bed, moving slowly through her evening routine, Francine deliberately avoids looking at the piano. Tonight, for the first time in years, the music is too close to the surface, too dangerous to acknowledge. Tonight, the girl she once was, the one with dreams as big as her talent, feels too near, too possible, too painful to remember. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. For the next 3 days, Francine doesn't leave her apartment. She unplugs her phone, disconnects from the outside world, and waits for the storm of attention to pass. Surely people will move on to the next viral sensation quickly enough. In the meantime, she has groceries delivered, leaving cash under the doormat, and asking the delivery person to leave the bags without knocking. She tells herself she's not hiding, merely preserving her privacy in the face of unwanted attention. On the 4th day, necessity forces her out. Her arthritis medication needs refilling, and the neighborhood pharmacy doesn't deliver prescriptions. Francine dresses carefully in her most nondescript outfit, beige slacks, a navy cardigan, her hair tucked under a simple scarf. She's just an elderly woman running errands, she tells herself. No one will recognize her from a blurry video taken in a dimly lit chapel. The spring air feels good after days of self-imposed isolation. Francine walks slowly, noting the azaleas beginning to bloom in her neighbor's gardens, the Spanish moss, swaying gently from the oak trees that line her street. Charleston has always been beautiful, even when her life within it was not. She'd stayed after the divorce when she could have returned to her Midwestern hometown, stayed even after Nancy, moved across the country to Seattle, stayed even as memories of her failed career and marriage haunted every theater and restaurant and park. Something about the city's resilience spoke to her, a place that had survived wars and hurricanes and economic shifts, yet maintained its elegant dignity. At the pharmacy, Francine waits patiently in line, her eyes downcast. When it's her turn, she hands over her prescription slip without making eye contact with the pharmacist. "It'll be about 15 minutes, Miss Wilson," the young man says. "Mind waiting?" Francine nods and moves to the waiting area, selecting a worn magazine from a stack on the table. She's halfway through an article about container gardening when she realizes the usual background chatter of the pharmacy has quieted. Looking up, she finds several customers staring at her with undisguised curiosity. A teenage girl is whispering excitedly to her mother while pointing in Francine's direction. "It's her," someone says loudly, "the singing widow from the video." Francine feels heat rise to her face. "I'm not a widow," she says automatically, then immediately regrets drawing attention to herself. An elderly man approaches, his eyes kind behind thick glasses. "My wife and I watched that video 10 times, reminded us of Leontine Price in her prime. You've got a gift, young lady." Despite herself, Francine smiles at being called young lady at 73. "That's very kind, but I'm just here for my prescription." "Are you giving any concerts?" asks a middle-aged woman clutching her shopping basket. "My mother's in assisted living, and they'd love to have you perform for their community." Before Francine can respond, the pharmacist calls her name. She hurries to the counter, pays quickly, and makes her escape, ignoring the continued questions and compliments that follow her to the door. Outside, she takes a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she clutches her medication bag. The walk home seems longer, each step an effort as she fights the urge to look over her shoulder. This attention, it's exactly what she'd feared. Charleston is too small, too connected. Everyone knows everyone else's business. The woman who sang alone at a funeral is now public property, a story to share over coffee, a curiosity to point out on the street. Francine is so distracted by these thoughts that she nearly collides with a man standing on the sidewalk in front of her apartment building. She mutters an apology and tries to step around him, but he moves deliberately into her path. "Ms. Montgomery?" he asks, his voice warm and confident. "Gabriel Parker, Artistic Director of the Charleston Community. Chorus, I've been trying to reach you for days." Francine looks up at him properly now, a tall black man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard and intelligent eyes behind fashionable glasses. He's dressed casually, but with a certain artistic flair that immediately identifies him as part of the city's cultural scene. "It's Wilson now," she corrects him automatically, "and I'm not interested in whatever you're offering." Gabriel doesn't move from her path. Instead, he holds out a small stack of papers. "I studied your recordings at Juilliard," he says, his voice betraying genuine admiration. "Your 1978 Un bel di vedremo was required listening in my vocal interpretation class. Professor Abernathy used to say, this is how you convey heartbreak without sacrificing technical perfection." Despite herself, Francine feels a spark of pride. Martin Abernathy had been one of the most respected vocal coaches in the country. The idea that he had used her recording as a teaching tool, it was almost too much to process. "What do you want, Mr. Parker?" she asks, her voice softer now. "Our soprano section leader is on maternity leave. We're preparing for the Southern Regional Choral Competition, and we're struggling with the Poulenc piece that's required this year." He hands her the sheet music he's been holding. "We rehearse Tuesday evenings and Sunday afternoons. No pressure, no publicity, just music, the way it should be." Francine glances at the score in her hands, Francis Poulenc's Gloria, a challenging work she'd performed once in her youth. The muscle memory of those soaring high notes, the complex rhythms, the Latin text all come rushing back. "I haven't sung seriously in decades," she says, attempting to hand back the music. "My voice isn't what it was." Gabriel doesn't take the score. "Neither is mine. That's not the point. The point is that music isn't meant to be silenced, Ms. Wilson, even when it changes, evolves, deepens." He steps aside finally, clearing her path to the apartment building door. "Tuesday at 7, First Presbyterian on Meeting Street. Just come listen if nothing else." Francine clutches the music to her chest as she watches him walk away. For a moment, she's transported back to another time when music was at the center of her existence, when her identity was inseparable from her voice. Those days are gone, she reminds herself firmly. That young woman with stars in her eyes and music in her soul had learned the hard way that talent isn't always enough, that dreams often collide with reality, that voices, like hearts, can break. Inside her apartment, Francine places the Poulenc score on the piano, where it looks strangely alive against the dusty wood. She won't go, of course. What would be the point? She's too old, too rusty, too scarred by past failures to expose herself to potential new ones. Yet she doesn't throw the music away. Instead, she finds herself opening it, humming the first few phrases, her trained musician's mind immediately registering the challenges and beauties of the composition. That night, for the first time in months, Francine dreams of singing, not in an empty chapel or a lonely apartment, but surrounded by other voices, her own threading through them like a silver strand through a complex tapestry. She wakes with tears on her cheeks and Poulenc's melodies echoing in her mind. Over the next few days, Francine tells herself repeatedly that she won't attend the rehearsal. Yet she finds herself practicing vocal exercises in the shower, stretching her range cautiously, noting with surprise that while her voice has deepened with age, much of her technique remains intact. On Monday, she even opens the piano cover and tentatively picks out the soprano line of the Poulenc, wincing at the stiffness in her fingers, but pleased when the muscle memory begins to return. When Tuesday evening arrives, Francine changes her outfit 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue dress she hasn't worn in years. She applies a touch of lipstick, arranges her silver hair neatly, and wraps a light scarf around her shoulders against the spring evening chill. Still telling herself she's only going to listen, she tucks the music into her purse and heads for the church on Meeting Street. First Presbyterian's Gothic architecture has always intimidated Francine slightly. Tonight, as she approaches its imposing doors, she nearly loses her nerve entirely. Through the stained glass windows, she can see figures moving inside, hear the muffled sounds of a piano playing scales for warm-up. Her heart races uncomfortably, and for a moment, she considers turning back. "Are you here for chorus rehearsal?" asks a friendly voice behind her. Francine turns to find a young woman with a cello case strapped to her back, smiling at her. "I'm Vanessa, one of the ringers they brought in for the competition," the woman continues, extending her hand. "Gabriel likes to have string accompaniment for the Poulenc. Are you new too? He's been recruiting like crazy since Rebecca went on maternity leave." The simple, normal interaction steadies Francine. This isn't a performance or an interview, it's just people making music together. "I'm just observing tonight," she says, taking Vanessa's offered hand. "Well, come on in. Gabriel doesn't bite, though he might make you do breathing exercises until you're dizzy." Vanessa laughs and holds the door open. Inside, about 30 people of various ages are arranging chairs in a semicircle, chatting and sorting through sheet music. Gabriel stands at a portable keyboard, working through a difficult passage with a small group of tenors. He looks up as Francine enters, and his face breaks into a genuine smile of welcome, though he makes no announcement or fuss about her arrival. Instead, he simply nods toward an empty chair in the soprano section and continues his work with the tenors. Hesitantly, Francine makes her way to the indicated seat. A middle-aged woman with a friendly face immediately leans over. "Welcome. I'm Helen. First soprano or second?" I'm just observing tonight," Francine says again, clutching her purse with the hidden music. Helen looks disappointed, but nods understandingly. "Well, you're welcome to follow along in my score if you'd like." Before Francine can respond, Gabriel calls the rehearsal to order. After a series of increasingly complex warm-ups that leave Francine silently mouthing the notes despite her resolution to only observe, the group turns to the Poulenc. Within minutes, Francine is utterly absorbed in the music, her trained ear noting the strengths and weaknesses of each section, the places where rhythms falter or harmonies need adjustment. When they reach the Domine Deus movement with its challenging soprano solo, Gabriel pauses. "All right, let's try this with the sectional lead first," he says, nodding to an Asian woman in her 30s who steps forward confidently. Her voice is technically proficient, but lacks the emotional depth the piece demands. Gabriel works with her patiently, suggesting phrasing adjustments and breathing techniques. After several attempts, he asks, "Would anyone else like to try?" The solo, different voices bring different colors to a piece like this. The silence that follows is broken only when Helen nudges Francine gently. "Weren't you humming along perfectly during warm-up? Give it a try." All eyes turn to Francine, who feels a flush spread across her cheeks. "I'm really just here to listen," she begins, but Gabriel interrupts. "Ms. Wilson, Would you honor us? Just this once. Something in his respectful tone, in the genuine curiosity on the faces around her, breaks through Francine's carefully constructed defenses. With slightly trembling hands, she removes the score from her purse and stands. I haven't done this in a very long time, she warns, her voice barely above a whisper. Music is like riding a bicycle, Gabriel says kindly. The body remembers, even when the mind doubts. He plays the introduction, and Francine takes a deep breath. The first notes emerge tentatively, her voice finding its way like a person moving through a once familiar room in dim light. But as the melody unfolds, something awakens within her. Muscle memory, yes, but something deeper too. By the time she reaches the soaring high notes of Domine Deus Agnus Dei, her voice has found its power, its color, its emotional truth. The room falls completely silent when she finishes. Then, spontaneous applause erupts from the chorus. Members? Francine blinks in surprise, suddenly self-conscious again. That, says Gabriel with quiet intensity, is how Poulenc should sound. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. The remainder of the rehearsal passes in a blur for Francine. She finds herself fully participating, singing with the soprano section, offering occasional suggestions when Gabriel asks for input. For 2 hours, she forgets her age, her arthritis, her disappointments. She is simply a musician again, part of something larger than herself, connected to others through the universal language of music. As the rehearsal concludes and people begin to gather their belongings, chorus members approach Francine one by one, introducing themselves, expressing admiration, inviting her to return. The genuine warmth of their welcome both overwhelms and touches her. Same time Thursday for sectionals? Gabriel asks casually as he packs up his music. Francine hesitates only briefly before nodding. I'll be there. Walking home through the warm Charleston evening, Francine feels lighter than she has in years. The city around her seems different somehow, more alive, more filled with possibility. Or perhaps it's she who has changed in the space of a single evening, awakened from a long, self-imposed hibernation by the simple act of raising her voice in song once more. For the first time since receiving Dolores's posthumous confession, Francine doesn't immediately think of all she's lost. Instead, she contemplates what might still be possible, what doors might still open if she finds the courage to walk through them. She's 73, not dead. Perhaps there's a difference between the closure of one chapter and the end of the entire story. Gabriel's parting words echo in her mind as she unlocks her apartment door. The voice changes with age, Ms. Wilson. It's supposed to. The beauty is in embracing what it becomes, not mourning what it was. Maybe, just maybe, the same could be true of life itself. The following week transforms Francine's quiet existence. She attends both regular rehearsals and additional sectional practices, quickly becoming an integral part of the Charleston Community Chorus. Her experience and training make her a valuable resource for the less seasoned singers, while her genuine humility, rare in someone of her talent, endears her to the entire group. For the first time in decades, Francine's calendar contains commitments. Her days have structure, and her evenings include conversations with people who are quickly becoming friends. The physical demands of regular singing challenge her aging body. Her arthritis flares painfully after long rehearsals, and she finds herself exhausted in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Yet there's a satisfaction in this particular kind of tiredness, the good fatigue that comes from purposeful effort rather than the dull exhaustion of empty days. On a rainy Thursday morning, Francine sits in her rheumatologist's waiting room, flipping through a magazine without really seeing it. Her joints have been particularly painful this week, and she's hoping for a stronger prescription or perhaps a cortisone injection to help her through the intensive rehearsal schedule leading up to the regional competition. Ms. Wilson? Dr. Reed appears in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Come on back. In the examination room, Francine explains her situation, the increased pain in her hands and knees, the new demands she's placing on her body, the importance of managing her symptoms effectively for the next few months. Dr. Reed listens carefully, his expression growing concerned as she demonstrates the limited mobility in her fingers. "Francine," he says finally, using her first name after 15 years as her physician, "I have to be honest with you. This level of activity is aggravating your condition considerably. The rehearsal schedule you're describing, it's simply too much stress for your joints." "But the competition is in 10 weeks, Francine protests. "I need to be part of this, Dr. Reed. I need to see it through." The doctor sighs, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "I understand that this is important to you. I can prescribe a stronger anti-inflammatory and recommend physical therapy, but you need to be realistic. If you continue at this pace, you risk permanent damage. At minimum, you'll be in significant pain." "I can handle pain," Francine says quietly. "I've had plenty of practice." Dr. Reed's expression softens. "I've been your doctor for a long time, Francine. I've watched you withdraw from life year by year. Now I see you engaged again, passionate about something. I want to support that, but not at the cost of your health. What if we try a modified approach? Perhaps you could attend fewer rehearsals, focus on preserving your energy for the most essential practices." Francine nods reluctantly, accepting the compromise, even as she silently resolves to continue with the full schedule. What Dr. Reed doesn't understand, what perhaps no one but another performer could understand, is that this opportunity feels like her last chance. Her final opportunity to reclaim a piece of herself that was stolen decades ago. Pain is a small price to pay for such redemption. As she leaves the medical building, Francine nearly collides with a woman hurrying up the steps. Both start to apologize simultaneously, then freeze in mutual recognition. "Mom?" Francine stares in disbelief at the woman before her, tall, slim, with streaks of grey in her dark hair, but unmistakably her daughter. "Nancy, what are you doing in Charleston?" Nancy Wilson Chen shifts uncomfortably, adjusting her designer handbag on her shoulder. At 45, she has her father's height and confident bearing, but Francine's expressive eyes. "I saw the video," she says finally. "It's all over the internet. Even in Seattle, people were sharing it." "Oh." Francine doesn't know what else to say. Their last conversation, 3 years ago at Nancy's son's high school graduation, had been polite but distant, the culmination of decades of strained relations that began when Nancy, at 15, chose to live with her father after the divorce. "You came all this way because of a video." Nancy's expression tightens. "I had business in Atlanta anyway. I don't know what I thought, that maybe we could have dinner or something." The awkwardness between them feels like a physical entity, heavy and immovable. 30 years of misunderstandings, resentments, and unspoken words stand between mother and daughter, creating a gulf wider than the continent that usually separates them. "Dinner would be nice," Francine says finally, surprised at how desperately she wants this connection despite the pain it invariably brings. "Are you free tonight?" They agree to meet at a restaurant in the historic district, a neutral territory, where perhaps new memories could be created without the ghosts of old ones intruding too forcefully. As they part, neither attempts a hug or even a handshake, their bodies as cautious as their words. Throughout the afternoon, as Francine prepares for the evening, her mind races with questions. Why now? After all these years, what does Nancy want? Is this yet another brief reconnection that will end in disappointed hopes? She changes outfits multiple times, applies and removes makeup, fusses with her hair until she laughs at herself in the mirror. "You're acting like this is a date, not dinner with your own daughter," she tells her reflection. The restaurant, Nancy has chosen is upscale without being pretentious, its tables spaced far enough apart for private conversation. Francine arrives early, requesting a quiet corner table, where her daughter's inevitable disappointment in her won't be on display for the entire dining room. Nancy arrives precisely on time, her corporate efficiency evident in her punctuality, and the brisk way she greets the hostess. She's wearing a tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than 3 months of Francine's pension, her only concession to after-work relaxation, the absence of a jacket and the top button of her silk blouse. Undone. "You look well," Francine offers as they settle at the table. "So do you," Nancy replies, studying her mother with an intensity that makes Francine want to check for spinach in her teeth. Different from the video somehow, stronger. Their conversation throughout the appetizer course remains painfully superficial. Comments about the menu, the weather in Charleston versus Seattle, the growth of the city in recent years.
Only after their entrees arrive and they've eaten a glass dozen and roll the subject across the country. You didn't tell us about your friend's funeral. Come catches Francine.
Of all the things she expected Nancy to ask about, Dolores's funeral wasn't even on the list. "Dolores wasn't your friend," she says carefully. "You barely knew her." "She was important to you," Nancy counters, her fork poised mid-air. "And no, one should have to attend a funeral alone." Something in Francine snaps at this, a lifetime of swallowed words suddenly rising to the surface. "I've done most things alone for the past 30 years, Nancy. One more hardly seemed worth mentioning. Besides, you made it very clear a long time ago that my life wasn't of interest to you." Nancy's face flushes. "That's not fair. I was a child when you and Dad divorced. I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that suddenly my mother, who used to fill our house with music, who used to be the center of everything, became this ghost of a person. You were physically present but completely absent at the same time. I was depressed," Francine says, the admission still difficult after all these years. "I lost everything that defined me in the space of 6 months. My career, my marriage, and then, worst of all, my daughter." "You didn't lose me." Nancy's voice rises slightly before she controls it. "You let me go. You didn't fight for me. Dad hired the best divorce lawyer in the state, and you didn't even contest the custody arrangement. Because I thought you'd be happier with him," Francine says softly. "He had money, stability, a beautiful home. What could I offer you? A tiny apartment and a mother who could barely get out of bed some days." The waiter approaches to refill their water glasses, then retreats hastily, sensing the tension between the two women. "I needed my mother," Nancy says after a long pause. "Not a big house or fancy schools, just my mom." The simple words pierce Francine's heart more deeply than any accusation could have. For 30 years she'd told herself she'd made the right, a choice, the selfless choice, in letting George have primary custody. She'd convinced herself that her absence from Nancy's life had been a gift, not an abandonment. Now, looking into her daughter's eyes so like her own, she sees the damage her misguided sacrifice has caused. "I'm sorry," Francine whispers, reaching across the table tentatively. After a moment's hesitation, Nancy takes her hand. "I thought I was doing what was best for you. I was wrong." This simple acknowledgement seems to release something in Nancy. Her posture softens, and words begin to flow more freely between them. She tells Francine about her husband David, a professor of environmental science, about her son Michael, now a sophomore at UCLA, about her work as an architectural project manager specializing in sustainable design. Francine listens hungrily, absorbing these details of a life she's largely missed, trying to fit them into the incomplete puzzle she carries of her daughter. "And now you're singing again," Nancy says as they linger over dessert. "The video? Mom, you were incredible. Why did you stop?" "Really?" No one has asked Francine this question so directly in decades. She's cultivated a narrative for herself, sacrificing her career for marriage and motherhood, then losing her confidence after the divorce. But it's a simplified version of a complex truth. Now, looking at Nancy's genuine curiosity, she feels compelled to offer a more honest answer. "Fear," she says simply. "After that disastrous review of my performance at the Charleston Opera House, I lost my confidence completely. When your father's affairs became public, I couldn't face the whispers, the pity. Then there was the practical side. I needed steady income as a single mother, and teaching offered that security in a way performing never could. But mostly, it was fear. Once you stop performing, once you step away from that world, it becomes increasingly terrifying to try to re-enter it. But you're performing now, with this choir," Nancy points out. "What changed?" Francine considers this, turning the question over in her mind. "Dolores's letter," she says finally. "Learning that the review that destroyed my confidence was orchestrated by someone I trusted, that my failure wasn't really a failure at all. It changed something fundamental in how I see my past." "Wait, what letter?" Nancy leans forward, confusion evident on her face. Francine explains about Dolores's letter, the decades-old betrayal, and how learning the truth had shifted something fundamental in her understanding of her own past. Nancy listens with growing astonishment, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "So, this woman, your supposed friend, deliberately sabotaged your career, contributed to your marriage falling apart, and then waited until she was dead to confess?" Nancy's voice rises with indignation. "That's unforgivable." "Perhaps," Francine says softly, "but holding on to that anger won't change the past. In a strange way, knowing the truth has been liberating. For decades I believed I wasn't good enough, that the critics were right about my voice, that your father was right to look elsewhere for happiness, that you were right to choose him over me. Now I understand that at least some of those failures weren't failures at all. They were orchestrated by someone else's jealousy." "But you lost so much," Nancy protests. "Your career, your confidence." "Yes," Francine interrupts gently, "and finding out the truth won't give me back those years or those opportunities, but it's given me permission to try again, even at 73, to stop hiding." As they finish their meal and walk together in the warm evening air, Francine finds herself telling Nancy about the chorus, about Gabriel's belief in her, about the upcoming competition. To her surprise, Nancy listens with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the music and the rehearsal process. "Would you—" Francine hesitates, afraid of pushing too far too soon. "Would you like to come to a rehearsal while you're in town? You could meet Gabriel and the others." Nancy's expression is unreadable for a moment before she replies, "I'd like that, Mom, very much." They part with an awkward but sincere hug, promises to meet again the following evening, and a fragile thread of hope connecting them that hasn't existed in 3 decades. The next day, Francine finds herself unusually nervous as she prepares for the evening's rehearsal. Nancy's visit feels like a dream, surreal and tenuous. The thought of her daughter watching her perform, even in the informal setting of a rehearsal, awakens anxieties Francine thought long buried. What if she disappoints Nancy yet again? What if her voice fails her? What if the frail connection they've established shatters under the weight of old patterns and expectations? With trembling hands, she takes a larger dose of her pain medication than usual, determined that arthritis won't interfere with her performance tonight. She dresses with extra care, applies a touch of makeup, and arranges her silver hair in a neater style than her usual rehearsal appearance. At the church, Francine is surprised to find Gabriel in an agitated state. The usually calm director paces the front of the room, checking his watch repeatedly as chorus members file in and take their seats. "Everything all right?" Francine asks. Gabriel shakes his head. The church sustained some water damage in last night's storm. Part of the ceiling in the fellowship hall collapsed. They've closed the building for emergency repairs. "But the competition is only 8 weeks away," Francine says, immediately understanding the implications. "We need this space to rehearse." "I know." Gabriel runs a hand over his close-cropped hair. "I've been calling around all day trying to find an alternative venue, but everything's either booked or beyond our budget. We might have to reduce to sectional rehearsals in people's living rooms until the repairs are complete." Francine thinks quickly. "What about the auditorium at Charleston Arts Academy? I taught there for 20 years. They might be willing to let us use the space after hours." Hope flashes across Gabriel's face. "Do you still have contacts there?" "The current principal was my student," Francine says with a small smile. "Let me make a call." As she steps away to use her phone, Francine notices Nancy hovering uncertainly near the entrance. She waves her daughter over, momentarily abandoning her conversation with Gabriel. "Nancy, this is Gabriel Parker, our director. Gabriel, my daughter Nancy." Gabriel's eyebrows rise slightly in surprise. Francine has never mentioned having a daughter, but he recovers quickly, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "A pleasure to meet you. Are you visiting from out of town?" "Seattle," Nancy confirms, shaking his hand. "I saw my mother's video and couldn't resist coming to hear her in person." "You're in for a treat," Gabriel says with obvious sincerity. "Your mother has transformed our soprano section. The depth and emotion she brings to the music, it's extraordinary." Francine feels a flush of pleasure at the compliment, especially with Nancy as witness. Before she can respond, her phone rings, the principal returning her call. She steps away again, explaining the chorus's predicament and making her request. To her relief, Richard Wong, once an awkward 12-year-old struggling through piano lessons in her studio, immediately agrees to help, offering the school's auditorium for their rehearsals until the church repairs are complete. When she returns to share the good news, Gabriel impulsively hugs her. "Francine Wilson, you are a miracle worker." "Everyone," he calls to the assembled chorus members, "thanks to our newest member, we have a solution to our venue crisis. Rehearsals will continue at Charleston Arts Academy starting Thursday." The news is met with applause and visible relief. As Gabriel organizes carpools and discusses the logistics of the new arrangement, chorus members approach Francine with genuine gratitude, reinforcing her sense of having found a place where she truly belongs and contributes. Throughout the rehearsal that follows, Francine is acutely aware of Nancy sitting in the back row, observing with an inscrutable expression. She sings with extra care, mindful of her technique and phrasing in a way she hasn't been since joining the group. When Gabriel asks her to demonstrate a particularly challenging passage for the other sopranos, she feels a familiar flutter of performance anxiety, but pushes through it, focusing on the music rather than her audience of one. After the rehearsal, as chorus members gather their belongings and chat in small groups, Nancy approaches, her expression thoughtful. "You were right," she says simply. "About what?" Francine asks, packing her music into her bag. "Your voice. It's extraordinary, Mom. I've never heard anything like it, even in professional performances." Nancy hesitates, then adds, "I wish I'd heard you sing more when I was growing up." The simple statement contains a world of regret. Nancy's for the connection she missed. Francine's for the silence she imposed on herself and her home after the divorce. Neither speaks for a moment, the weight of lost years hanging between them. "Would you like to join us for coffee?" Gabriel interjects, approaching with several chorus members. It's become something of a tradition after Wednesday rehearsals. There's a cafe just around the corner that stays open late. Nancy glances at her watch, then at Francine. "I'd like that," she says, and Francine feels something tight and painful in her chest begin to loosen. The cafe is crowded with chorus members when they arrive, tables pushed together to accommodate the impromptu gathering. Francine introduces Nancy to those she's come to know best over the past weeks. Helen with her infectious laugh, Marcus with his encyclopedic knowledge of choral repertoire, Vanessa with her quiet intelligence. To Francine's surprise, Nancy fits easily into the group, asking thoughtful questions about the competition and sharing stories of her occasional attendance at Seattle Symphony performances. As the evening progresses, Francine notices Nancy watching, her interactions with the other chorus members, with an expression that gradually shifts from surprise to something like understanding. It occurs to Francine that her daughter has never seen her like this, engaged, passionate, part of a community. The Francine that Nancy grew up with after the divorce was a diminished version of herself, a woman who moved through life like a ghost, teaching piano lessons by rote and retreating into silence whenever possible. "Your mother is a godsend," Helen tells Nancy at one point, leaning across the table. "She's been coaching our alto section on that tricky middle passage in the Poulenc. We've improved 100% since she joined." "Not just the altos," Marcus adds. "The entire chorus sounds more cohesive, more emotionally connected. It's like her understanding of the music is contagious somehow." Francine feels herself blushing at the unexpected praise. "You're all being too kind. I'm just happy to be singing. Again after so long." "Why did you stop?" Vanessa asks innocently, unaware of the landmine she's stepping on. "With a voice like yours." A momentary silence falls over the table. Nancy's eyes meet Francine's, both aware of the complex history behind that simple question. "Life took me in a different direction," Francine says finally. "But music has a way of finding you again when you're ready for it." Gabriel raises his coffee cup in a small toast. "To second chances and new beginnings," he says, and everyone at the table joins in, the moment of awkwardness passing into genuine camaraderie. Later, as Francine and Nancy walk back toward Francine's apartment, a comfortable silence settles between them. The first in Francine's memory that doesn't feel laden with unspoken resentments or careful distance. "They really respect you," Nancy says finally. "Your chorus friends, they value what you bring to the group." "They're good people," Francine replies. "Serious about the music, but also supportive of each other. I've been lucky to find them." Nancy stops walking, turning to face her mother directly. "I'm flying back to Seattle tomorrow," she says. "I have to get back to work, but I'd like to come to the competition in June if that's okay with you." Francine feels her heart expand. With a joy so sudden and complete it's almost painful. "I'd like that very much," she manages, her voice steadier than she feels. "And maybe—" Nancy hesitates, uncertainty flashing across her face. "Maybe Michael could come too. Your grandson. He's studying music at UCLA. Composition. I think he'd like to meet you properly. A grandson who studies music." The revelation strikes Francine like a physical blow. The continuity of passion across generations, the genetic thread linking her to a young man she barely knows. "I'd be honored," she whispers, not trusting her voice for more. As they continue walking, Nancy tells Francine about Michael's compositions, his interest in film scoring, his talent for improvisation. Francine listens with a hunger that has nothing to do with music and everything to do with connection, with the possibility that despite everything, despite the years of separation and misunderstanding, something essential remains unbroken between them. At her apartment door they embrace again, this time without awkwardness. "Call me when you get home safely," Francine says, falling naturally into motherhood despite the decades of distance. Nancy smiles, a genuine smile that reaches her eyes. "I will, and we'll talk about dates for the competition." As Francine watches her daughter walk toward her waiting taxi, she feels a curious lightness, as if something long calcified within her has finally begun to dissolve. 2 miracles in the space of weeks, her voice returning, and now this tentative reconnection with Nancy. Perhaps Dolores's posthumous confession had set in motion more healing than Francine could have imagined possible. Have you ever encountered or known someone who experienced an unexpected second chance like Francine's? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the weeks that follow, Francine throws herself into chorus rehearsals with renewed energy. The connection with Nancy gives her a sense of purpose beyond the music itself, a desire to make her daughter proud, to justify Nancy's belief in her, to be the woman and artist she might have been had life taken different turns. The physical toll of this commitment becomes increasingly difficult to hide, however. Despite stronger medication and the cortisone injection Dr. Reed reluctantly administered, Francine's arthritis grows more painful with each rehearsal. The delicate joints in her fingers swell visibly, making it difficult to handle her sheet. Music. At night, she soaks her hands in warm water infused with Epsom salts, trying to reduce the inflammation enough to function the next day. Gabriel notices, of course. His trained eye misses little about his singer's physical condition. After a particularly challenging rehearsal in which Francine struggles to maintain her usual vocal control through waves of pain, he asks her to stay behind after the others have left. "You're hurting yourself," he says without preamble, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't think I haven't noticed." Francine looks down at her swollen hands, then back at Gabriel with defiance. "I can handle it. The competition is only 6 weeks away." "At what cost?" Gabriel counters. "I've seen singers push through pain before. It never ends well. The body has limits, Francine." "So does time," she says quietly. "I'm 73 years old, Gabriel. This may be my last chance to perform. At this level, my daughter and grandson are coming to the competition. I can't let them down." Gabriel studies her for a long moment, his expression a complex mixture of admiration and concern. "I won't stop you," he says finally, "but I'm modifying the rehearsal schedule for the entire chorus. 2 full rehearsals per week instead of 3, with optional sectionals in between. And I want you to work with our movement coach on techniques to reduce physical strain while singing." Francine starts to protest, but Gabriel holds up a hand. "This isn't just for you. Several of our members have been struggling with the intensity of our preparation. A more focused, less physically demanding approach might actually improve our performance." Though Francine suspects this is at least partly a gentle fiction for her benefit, she accepts the compromise, relieved to maintain her place in the chorus while acknowledging her physical limitations. The reduced schedule does help, allowing her body more recovery time between the intense sessions. She works diligently with the movement coach, learning subtle adjustments to her posture and breathing that ease the strain on her arthritic joints while maintaining vocal quality. Regular phone calls with Nancy become part of Francine's new routine. Their conversations, initially cautious and focused primarily on the upcoming competition, gradually deepen to include more personal exchanges. Nancy shares stories of her projects at work, her marriage to David, her hopes and worries for Michael. Francine finds herself opening up about her years of teaching, her quiet life in Charleston, her rekindled passion for music. One evening, after describing a particularly successful rehearsal, Francine hears herself saying, "I wish your father could see me now." The words slip out before she can censor them, and she immediately regrets the reference to George. Their conversations have carefully avoided direct mention of him, circling the shared history without confronting it directly. To her surprise, Nancy laughs softly. "Dad always said you had the voice of an angel but the stubbornness of a mule. I think he'd be impressed that both qualities are still intact at 73. The casual, almost affectionate reference to George and the revelation that he had spoken positively about her to their daughter startles Francine. He said that? Even after everything? There's a pause on the line before Nancy responds. Mum, Dad always admired your talent, even when your marriage was falling apart. He was a terrible husband in many ways, but he never stopped believing in your voice. He used to attend your students' recitals sometimes, sitting in the back where you wouldn't notice him. He said he could always tell which students had really learned from you. They played with emotion, not just technique. This glimpse into a parallel history, one where George maintained a kind of distant respect for her, even as he betrayed their marriage, unsettles Francine's long-held narrative. Had she been wrong about that too? Had she misinterpreted his actions as completely as she had misunderstood her own failures? Is he... Francine hesitates, not sure she wants the answer. Is he well? He died 3 years ago, Nancy says gently. Heart attack. It was quick. I'm sorry, Francine says, and means it. Despite everything, there had been love between them once, and a daughter who carries parts of both of them. He would be proud of what you're doing now, Nancy says after a moment. Starting over, finding your voice again. He always said you were the bravest person he knew. These revelations leave Francine contemplative long after the call ends. The past she's carried for decades, a history of failure, betrayal, and loss, is being rewritten day by day. Not erased, but complicated, humanized, rendered in shades of grey rather than stark blacks and whites. As the competition approaches, the chorus's hard work begins to coalesce into something extraordinary. The challenging Poulenc piece that once seemed nearly insurmountable now flows from them with confidence and emotional depth. Gabriel's leadership, demanding but always supportive, draws the best from each section, creating a harmonious whole greater than the sum of its parts. One evening after rehearsal, as Francine waits for her bus, Gabriel joins her at the stop. I have a favor to ask, he says without preamble. I'd like you to take the solo in the final movement of the Poulenc. Francine stares at him in shock. Lisa, their regular soloist, has fully recovered from her earlier illness and has been performing the part beautifully. Why would you change? Soloists this close to the competition. Lisa is doing a wonderful job. She is, Gabriel agrees, but when you filled in during sectionals last week, something magical happened. The entire chorus responded to your interpretation in a way I've rarely seen. There was a depth, an authenticity that transformed the piece from excellent to transcendent. I can't take Lisa's solo, Francine protests. It would be unfair to her after all her work. It was Lisa's idea, Gabriel says quietly. She came to me yesterday and suggested it herself. She said, and I quote, Francine's voice tells a story that mine just can't. This piece needs that story. Francine feels tears threatening and blinks them back. The generosity of the gesture touches her deeply. Are you sure this is best for the chorus? For the competition? Gabriel's expression grows serious. I've been directing choirs for 20 years, Francine. I've never been more certain of anything. Your voice belongs in this solo. It's why you came to us. The bus appears at the corner, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Francine takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the convergence of past and present, the hand of fate or chance or whatever one might call it that led her to that empty chapel to sing for Dolores and unknowingly set this entire journey in motion. All right, she says simply, I'll do it. On the bus ride home, Francine feels a curious mixture of terror and elation. The solo is demanding, exposing, unforgiving of weakness or hesitation. It will place her voice at the center of the performance, subject to the scrutiny of judges, audience, and her fellow singers. It's exactly what the young Francine Montgomery once craved, and what the older Francine Wilson has avoided for decades. Yet beneath the anxiety lies a deeper certainty. This moment, this opportunity to reclaim her voice not as it was, but as it is now, rich with experience and deepened by loss, feels like a gift she cannot refuse. Whatever happens at the competition, she will sing her truth without apology or regret. The night before the competition, Francine sleeps poorly, her mind racing with fragments of music, her body tense with anticipation. She rises early, moving carefully through her morning routine, treating her aging body with the same deliberate attention a professional athlete might give to pre-competition preparation. A text from Nancy confirms that she and Michael have arrived safely in Charleston and will meet Francine at the competition venue. The thought of performing for her daughter and grandson, a young musician who might understand what this means to her, adds another layer of emotional complexity to an already overwhelming day. When she arrives at Charleston Arts Academy for the chorus's final rehearsal before departing for the competition in Savannah, Francine finds an atmosphere of focused excitement. Chorus members greet each other with hugs and encouraging words, their nervousness channeled into positive energy. Gabriel moves among them with calm authority, addressing last-minute concerns and reinforcing confidence. "Circle up, everyone!" he calls once all have arrived. The chorus forms a large ring in the center of the auditorium, hands joined in a pre-performance ritual Francine has come to cherish. "We've worked incredibly hard for this moment. But today isn't about winning or losing. It's about making music that touches hearts, our own and those who hear us. That's the only victory that truly matters." His eyes meet Francine's across the circle, and she feels the special weight of his words. For her, this performance represents something beyond competition, a reclamation, a reconciliation, a second chance at the joy that was stolen from her long ago. "Now, let's warm up and run through the transitions one last time," Gabriel continues. "Bus leaves for Savannah at noon sharp. Competition order has us performing at 4 o'clock. The final rehearsal passes in a blur of focused energy. Francine feels her voice responding beautifully, her earlier nerves transforming into the productive adrenaline that once fueled her best performances. Her body's pain recedes to the background, acknowledged but not permitted to dominate her. Awareness. On the bus to Savannah, Francine sits alone, using the time to center herself mentally and emotionally. She reviews the music in her mind, visualizes her solo performance, and practices the breathing techniques that will support her through the demanding piece. Around her, other chorus members chat excitedly or listen to music through headphones, each preparing in their own way for the challenge ahead. The historic Savannah Theatre, venue for the Southern Regional Choral Competition, bustles with activity when they arrive. Choruses from 5 states mill about in the ornate lobby and backstage areas, some in formal performance attire, others still in travel clothes awaiting their turn to use the designated changing rooms. As Francine follows her group toward their assigned preparation area, she scans the crowded lobby for Nancy and Michael. Just when she's about to give up and focus on getting ready, she spots them. Nancy in an elegant blue dress Francine has never seen before, and beside her a tall young man with George's jawline and Francine's sensitive eyes. "Mom!" Nancy waves, navigating through the crowd toward her. "We made it!" The three of them stand awkwardly for a moment before Nancy takes the initiative, embracing Francine warmly. "Mom, this is Michael. Michael, your grandmother." Michael extends his hand, then seems to reconsider and leans in for a quick, slightly uncomfortable hug. "Nice to finally meet you properly," he says. "I was too young to remember much from that graduation." Francine drinks in the sight of him, 20 years old, with an artist's observant gaze and a musician's attentive posture. "I'm so glad you..." Both came, she says, emotional overwhelm threatening her vocal composure. I should join my group now, but I'll see you after the performance. We have excellent seats, Nancy assures her. Break a leg, Mom. We're so proud of you already. These simple words, we're proud of you, carry Francine through the increasingly tense waiting period as other choruses perform and their turn approaches. She changes into her performance attire, a simple but elegant black dress with a touch of silver embroidery at the neckline, chosen to blend with the chorus while accommodating her solo status. Her hands shake slightly as she applies lipstick and arranges her silver hair, but her reflection shows a woman composed and ready, her eyes bright with purpose. Gabriel gathers the chorus for final instructions 15 minutes before their performance time. Remember, we sing for each other and for the joy of the music, he reminds them. Everything else is secondary. As they line up to take the stage, Francine feels a moment of pure panic, a suddenly visceral memory of that long-ago performance that had been sabotaged, of the crushing weight of perceived failure, of the critical eyes and ears waiting to judge her once again. Her breath shortens, her heart races, and for a terrifying moment she considers fleeing. Then Helen, standing beside her in the soprano section, takes her hand and squeezes it gently. "We've got you," she whispers, and Francine realizes that this time is fundamentally different. She is not alone on that stage, not carrying the entire weight of expectation on her shoulders. She's part of something larger than herself, supported and valued, not despite her age and imperfections, but because of the depth they bring to her artistry. The stage manager signals their entrance, and the Charleston Community Chorus moves onto the historic stage with practiced precision. The theater before them is a sea of faces, competition judges in the front row with their evaluation forms, chorus directors from other groups studying their potential competition, family members and supporters filling the remaining seats. Francine spots Nancy and Michael in the 10th row center, their faces expectant and encouraging. Gabriel takes his position before them, his presence calming and authoritative. He lifts his hands, and in that suspended moment before the music begins, Francine feels a perfect clarity, a certainty that whatever happens next, she is exactly where she belongs. Their program begins with a Renaissance motet, moves through a contemporary American piece, and concludes with the challenging Poulenc that has been their focus for months. Each selection flows into the next with growing confidence and musicality. Francine can feel the audience's engagement, the subtle shift in energy that occurs when listeners move from polite attention to genuine emotional connection. As the opening notes of the Poulenc's final movement begin, Francine steps forward slightly for her solo. She meets Gabriel's eyes, receives his almost imperceptible nod of encouragement, and then there is nothing but the music and her voice rising to meet it. The solo passage sweeps upward, demanding technical precision and emotional vulnerability in equal measure. Francine channels every moment of her 73 years into the music, the joy of her early success, the love she once shared with George, the pain of betrayal and loss, the years of silence, and now this unexpected renaissance. Her voice, deeper and richer than in her youth but no less powerful, fills the historic theater with a sound that seems to suspend time itself. When the solo concludes and the full chorus rejoins for the final phrases, Francine feels a subtle shift in their collective sound, as if her emotional openness has invited a similar vulnerability from each singer, creating a moment of rare artistic communion. The final chord resolves and hangs in the air, perfect in its completion, before Gabriel's hands gently release it into silence. For a heartbeat, the theater remains absolutely still. That magical moment when an audience is so moved they momentarily forget to applaud. Then the silence breaks into thunderous appreciation, the audience rising to their feet in spontaneous recognition of what they've just witnessed. Francine sees Nancy and Michael standing, Michael's hands cupped around his mouth as he shouts his approval, Nancy wiping tears from her cheeks even as she applauds. In that moment, the years of separation seem to dissolve, the broken threads of family somehow rewoven through the healing power of music and truth. Later, after the judges have awarded the Charleston Community Chorus second place in the competition, a remarkable achievement for a group that had never before placed in the top 5, Francine finds herself surrounded by her 2 families, the chorus members who have become her musical home, and the daughter and grandson with whom she is cautiously rebuilding bridges. "Grandma, that was incredible," Michael says, the familial term slipping out naturally. "The way you shaped that solo line in the Poulenc, I've never heard anything like it. The harmonic tension you created with that sustained high A against the alto's dissonant entrance." He breaks off, laughing at himself. "Sorry, music composition major, I get carried away." "No, please," Francine encourages, delighted by his technical understanding and enthusiasm. "I'd love to hear your analysis." As Michael launches into a detailed appreciation of the performance, Francine catches Nancy's eye over his head. There's a look of wonder on her daughter's face, a recognition of the unexpected connection between grandmother and grandson, a shared passion for music that transcends the years of absence. Gabriel approaches, trophy in hand. "The real victory was your solo," he tells Francine quietly. The judge's comments specifically mentioned the emotionally transcendent soprano solo that elevated the entire performance. "You should be very proud." "We all did this together," Francine insists, including the gathered chorus members in her response. "I'm just grateful you took a chance on a rusty old voice." "Old, perhaps," Gabriel says with a smile. "Rusty, never." As the celebration continues, around her, Francine finds herself thinking of Dolores, her childhood friend, her greatest rival, her unwitting catalyst for this unexpected third act. There's a certain poetry in the fact that it was Dolores's funeral that set these events in motion, that her posthumous confession created the space for Francine to reclaim her voice and rebuild her fractured family. In the weeks following the competition, life settles into a new pattern for Francine. The chorus begins preparing for their fall season, with Gabriel assigning her a small solo in each planned performance. Her arthritis continues to challenge her, but she's learned to manage it more effectively, balancing her musical commitments with proper rest and treatment. Nancy and Michael return to their lives on the West Coast, but the distance now feels bridgeable. Weekly video calls become part of Francine's routine, and plans are made for a Christmas visit to Seattle. Michael sends recordings of his compositions, eager for Francine's feedback, creating a new dimension to their evolving relationship. Most surprisingly, a documentary filmmaker who attended the competition approaches Francine about telling her story. Not just the viral video that captured public attention briefly, but the deeper narrative of a woman reclaiming her voice and her connections after decades of silence. After initial hesitation, Francine agrees, seeing in the project an opportunity to explore the themes of loss, resilience, and renewal that have shaped her journey. On a warm autumn evening, Francine stands before the piano in her apartment, the instrument now free of dust and regularly tuned. Her fingers, stiff but determined, move over the keys as she works through a piece she's composing for Michael's 21st birthday. The music reflects her journey, beginning in a minor key with hesitant phrases, gradually opening into a more confident melodic line, and ultimately resolving into a major key theme of quiet triumph. Outside her window, Charleston continues, its eternal dance of past and present history and renewal. Inside, Francine Wilson gives voice to her own personal renaissance, one note at a time. Her life, like her voice, has changed with age, deeper, more textured, marked by experience. But as Gabriel once told her, the beauty lies in embracing what it has become, not mourning what it was. The young Francine Montgomery once dreamed of applause in grand opera houses. The Francine Wilson of today has discovered something perhaps more precious: the joy of making music that bridges generations, heals old wounds, and opens doors to unimagined futures. Her greatest performance, indeed, was not on any grand stage, but in finding the courage to sing again after a lifetime of silence. Congratulations! Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.